When I direct my team, I bring in context, like where are these vulnerabilities? What is the vulnerability? Is it a known exploited vulnerability produced by a CISO? If it's one of those and it's exposed to 8 billion people, you have 24 hours to fix it. Because if you don't...
Erik, it's such an honor to have you on the show here. You've been one of the senior security leaders that I have felt inspired by your writings, whether it's in the Harvard Business Review or you being a thought leader and giving so many incredible, insightful talks which are out there. What we're trying to do at CISO Confidential, this series of podcasts, is really bring out the life of a true CISO. And why is it so difficult? According to the Workforce Index report that released last year, the average tenure of a CISO right now in a Fortune 500 company is 18 months versus their counterparts, CXOs, to be around 54 months. So it's almost 3 times lower. Why is that the case? And I want to bring out the stories around the fact that this is a very, very, very difficult job. It's not the generic job that people just think about strategy, and I'm not trying to downplay other jobs, but here, the consequences are very evident with what's going on in terms of CISO churn, CISO frustration. So considering you've seen multiple situations given your leadership position and you've been a part of various initiatives which have studied not one but many hacks which are out there, right? Walk us through one day that you actually went through an actual incident and how you and your team responded. Maybe you were a CISO, maybe you were not a CISO at that time, but would love to get your thing from let's live the life of Erik on a day of an actual hack, and what did that look like?
Sure. And I think what I'd like to talk about is a lot of how does this happen and what do we do about it and all of that. But on the front of when a hack actually occurs and what do you do? I mean, the thing that people need to understand is there's always uncertainty at the initial ground swell of what's happening. This how bad is this intrusion? How bad are things actually going? Where are they? You start with a blank slate of next to nothing, of understanding of potentially where that is, and then you start pulling the breadcrumbs and you start understanding the situation. And I think what's incredibly important for CISOs is you are the calm, cool, collected executive that needs to just bring the temperature down inside of a potential very large scale situation and keep everybody focused. Start with where are they? Can we evict them? Can we contain it? Start with how do we manage the disruption inside the organization, to its most minimal places. And when there's gonna be a lot of people talking, a lot of swirl, a lot of things about we should be doing this, we should be doing this, we should be doing this. You've got to stay focused on, eviction, containment, and then, business operations and back to continuity. Now, one of the things that we've studied in my role as the chairman of the Cybersecurity Working Group of the Health Sector Council, this is an elected position. We have 450 organizations in it and 1,000 people. We studied in a document called the Landscape Analysis last year in healthcare specifically, which is where I've been for the last 14 years. How is this happening? Like, how are we getting beat? We have all these measures that we think that we're doing to control this and stop this, but you just open up the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever your newspaper is, and you'll see one event after another event after another event. And I wanted to get down to the brass tacks on this, the focused problem. The bad actors are operating at a scale that they're capable of enumerating, understanding us, and doing all of this work. But the methodologies that they're using to break in and cause the damage is consistent. What is it? And why are we not focusing on that? If we're talking about ransomware, we're talking about long-term disruptions. There are 3 ways that they break in, and there's one thing they do once they're inside. And the 3 ways in, social engineering, nope, none of this is going to be revolutionary. It's going to be, of course it is. Social engineering, and that's the phishing, that's all of those kinds of things. But it's also engineering the service desk, using the last 4 digits of your social security number and the date of birth as an identity verification as your service desk will allow a bad actor to enroll another multi-factor device. And then that will get them their beachhead. That will get them logged into Citrix or wherever that is. Another one is you have a vulnerability exposed to the internet. So we always chase vulnerabilities. And, when I direct my team, I bring in context, like where are these vulnerabilities? What is the vulnerability? Is it a known exploited vulnerability produced by a CISO? If it's one of those and it's exposed to 8 billion people, you have 24 hours to fix it. Because if you don't, it's going to get popped because that's how fast it goes. But if it's deep inside my network, segmented off somewhere, yeah, okay. It's not the same level of problem. So that vulnerability or a misconfiguration, a lack of two-factor authentication on an asset exposed to the internet, that's a misconfiguration, or a cloud service that has a configuration container error, something along those lines. That's the second way. The third way is a part of an ecosystem challenge. Our third parties that we work with, they have our data, sure, but they also have connections to us. And that could be a persistent connection. It could be a remote access connection. Maybe they're writing your access, channels through your VPNs, or maybe they have their own that they've installed. In healthcare, this is very common, where you work with medical device manufacturers and they certify a product type, and they say, in order for us to manage and maintain this, we have to deploy it with our own remote access tool on your network. Like, whoa, it's a backdoor into our environment. Unless you have that understood and you understand where you're going to contain that and how you're going to do it, that could be a way in. But the game isn't over with the way in. That's the first beachhead. That's landing on the beaches of Normandy. At the end of the day, in ransomware, and understanding your adversary and the mindset of the adversary, so we're talking about organized crime. What is their motivation? Their motivation is financial. They want to cause extortion. They use ransomware as a lever to cause extortion. In healthcare, they don't have to go too crazy with how they do that. What they do is they attack the IT administrator. They use all the credentials that the IT administrator already has. They get on their workstations. They do all their stuff. They move through the environment fairly quickly. It doesn't take a lot. And once they get the credential, or they can create equivalent credentials of domain dominance, when they own the control systems like Active Directory, just like the admin owns the control systems, guess what? Now you can throw ransomware wherever you want to throw it. Every single healthcare attack to date, with every single CISO I've spoken to, has been that. And the study,
every single
one. I haven't missed yet.
And you talk to a lot of healthcare CISOs.
Talk to a lot of CISOs. And that was, it was not only, we did interviews as part of this landscape analysis where we spoke with 25, but also just my own informal things that have been out there, and that's been it. So
very, very insightful. And I'm guessing you've experienced this. And
not a ransomware attack, yes, on wood, but attacks that, where they get in and they cause problems. Absolutely. I mean, that's, generally speaking, that happens, unfortunately, more often than we want it to happen. And, again, it comes down to the resilience and the playbooks that your teams are doing in order to know where it is.
Erik, on those lines, how do you set expectations with your leaders? Because we all know hacks are inevitable, right? In some shape or form, it does happen, right?
Yes.
So your communication strategy, generically, more towards the executive leadership, and especially during the time where healthcare is huge into digitization and giving the digital doorway for patients to come in and do everything, almost everything on the mobile app. During that time, how do you actually keep the organization, especially the leadership, informed about the right kind of risks?
So we talk about this, and I've done this in pretty much all my organizations. I bring it up to 3 risk themes and then one sort of contextual thing that surrounds those themes. The 3 risk themes are, first and foremost, patient safety. And patient safety comes down to, as it gets instantiated right now, it's long-term disruption due to ransomware attacks and things like that. If a hospital system is down for 30 days, we're not caring for patients in a community. People go on diversion, surgeries get, elective surgeries get, moved, and it causes problems. So they get that. We understand we're caring for people's lives, and that's frankly always the most important thing, in my opinion. The second one is safeguarding of financial assets.
True.
And we haven't even gotten to data yet. Data's the third. But the second one on the financial assets, I mean, that's fraud. That's the case of business email compromise. It's how can they, potentially break in, cause ACH, transfer, changes, fraudulent changes, or, do something in order to literally steal money out of your coffers. And there's a lot of financial process and things like that, other sort of checks and balances that you put in place there in addition to some of the tech. The third is the data and privacy and confidentiality. So in healthcare, that is actually how we grew up, was data security. I think many CISOs and security professionals still are too grounded in that. They think all that we have to focus on is data, and they're missing the other 2, resiliency, patient safety, financial. surrounding all of that is this what I call the complexity factor. It's an X factor. And as we grow in organizations through M&A, divestitures, et cetera, we are growing, especially based on the clip that you're growing, you can potentially grow at a very fast rate. And as you grow, you're adding all this technology in. This technology that needs to be rationalized in some kind of way. You have technical debt that's getting added into the environment. So having a playbook to really understand how you streamline that, simplify that, and know, is your security program covering every edge of the organization or not? Needs to be based on starting with the tech and then going to the processes that run through that. And what I've done and what I recommend others to do is like literally itemize that out. What does it mean to run your program? Are those elements, those processes and technologies actually in the new acquisitions? Have you converted it? If you haven't, what's the plan to do so? That turns into your strategy, and that turns into sort of how it manages it.
That sounds super articulate and at the same time very comprehensive. But I'm pretty sure when you go to your CFO or your CEO, right? They're like, Erik, that's why we got you. And that's the reason why you're taking care of this, right? What kind of communication? Walk us through maybe a meeting in one of your past roles with the CEO, with the CFO, about budgets, about our resiliency, about security posture. Just walk us through something like that.
So I've gone through a couple of journeys of this, and I've changing my mindset as well a little bit. When you're early in your maturity career on a program, it's easy to kind of use maturity as a rating to set targets and goals. In the past, that's what I have done is I've set my 3-year plans based on, okay, we're at this level of maturity today. We want to be that level in the future. What is that going to take? What's the delta and the gap associated to that? And then the tech is actually only a small part of it. The big piece of it is the human capital and the financial plan. And so tying all of those three things together to hit that mark, works for me when I talk to my CFO about we want to get to this level.
That was early in your career, right?
Early, and I'm going to still do it. I mean, because it's still kind of in the matrix. Where I'm switching it now is enterprise risk management. So going to, instead of like maturity, like we could chase maturity, but that's kind of like how good is the football team at, running drills, versus how well are we covering a specific risk item? So how well are we covering ransomware? How well are we covering data breaches? How well are we covering growth and things like that? And so like really getting to an understanding of like, what is that risk? And the way I do risk is we plot it by inherent risk and then control of that risk. So instead of likelihood impact, it's inherentness, which actually has likelihood impact embedded inside of it. And that's there's bad people in the world. If it was all uncontrolled, how bad would it be? So ransomware is right at the top because that's causing all kinds of damage. And then things get, grades of green, down as you go. We don't control how bad the bad people are, although we can influence it. What we do control is the control environment and how well we've managed that. So the mapping of the risk to the control environment and the processes is really important to be able to show them movement. And so when I talk to them, it's about here we are. Here's what the plan is to get this over to here. Here's a delta, and this is what the investment is. Are we okay with that? Can we absorb that in this year's budget? Can we not absorb that in this year's budget? Let's have a conversation about what that is.
Moving towards the final question, we are at the FAIR conference right now, and everything which you spoke about, it's such a beautiful first principles way of actually looking at risk in an objective way, in a quantified way. Right? Mm-hmm. The whole goal of FAIR has been how do you standardize that? How do you go ahead and because I've known a lot of CISOs, as you can imagine, a part of my job, and I would definitely place you in the top 10 percentile with all the great work that you do. And I think for you, a lot of that comes in very instinctively in terms of, the right things to do from a first principles basis. But not everybody's Erik. So therefore, they need some kind of a framework on making that happen and make that happen in a proper way. Yeah. FAIR has been very difficult in the past because it's been very manual, very, very subjective inputs which are out there. Of course, we're trying to automate that. Your quick thoughts over the last few days that you've spent at the conference, just trying to double click on people who are actually using it, and how do you think the future of this should pan out to be?
I think I've been on different ends of the spectrum on this. Like where is quantification going? How much effort and resources are we investing in this? what's the ultimate outcome that we're trying to get to? Sure. At the end of the day, the ultimate outcome we're trying to get to is, where do I expend my resources? And is it being done in a reasonable way? And are we making reasonable decisions based on the outputs? And in cyber, a lot of if we could somehow measure the dark matter, like the analogy I use is like we're trying to measure dark matter. We can't see it because it's unseeable, right? Like, so far we know it exists, but we can't measure it. We can't see it. What we can measure is the effects of it around it. And that's what we're doing right now in cybersecurity. We're like, are we not getting hacked because our program is great? Or are we not getting hacked because the threat actor just didn't hit us and they got bored, or it was too hard, or whatever? The difference between those two answers is actually an incredible win for how well we're doing, or wah wah. They didn't come after us, When you get into quantification, the thing that it's actually less, I think, on the CISO side and more on the business side are the numbers that you're putting in front of people, do they make sense? And
needs to be defendable.
Yeah. Is it defendable? Are they, like in healthcare, we understand risk. We understand risk models. We understand you got a 90% chance, to survive this cancer, or 10% chance not to, those kinds of things. Yep. We understand how to do that. And it's based on science.
Yep.
We don't have a lot of science here. We've got a lot of art that is kind of turning into science and objectivity and things. And I think that we're getting better at it. I did have some really fun conversations at FAIR this week. One where I sat down with a prominent CISO and he actually just pulled out his stuff and started showing me everything. I was like, this is the first time I've actually seen a real interesting answer to the question. Now, they're financial services, so it's a different model. I think we still have to, how does this play into people's lives? And how do you turn the life safety side into this outside of just a financial, revenue recognition or revenue defense kind of thing? And I think as well, my other thought is the trap that we run into, and you learn this in doing CISSP, annualized loss expectancies and things like that. It's like an asset has value, and then you figure out how often that asset is going to go down and the value is going to be diminished. If we look at the world as a bunch of assets and servers and applications, then we continue to be technologists and we're losing sight of what the real picture is. The real picture is we have business processes, clinical processes, financial processes that run the gambit through the whole thing. And if we can really understand how to segment those lines and understand what it means from a financial perspective and from a life safety perspective, and then we can understand the disruption of that, I don't even know if I care about the likelihood. If it's material, then I know I need to be working on a plan for what we do, when it goes down.
The resiliency, the loss magnificence.
It is the resiliency side of the equation. And I think that as a profession, we need to get way better at managing risk and resiliency.
And that's the reason FAIR has two parts, right? If you see the FAIR tree, the left side is loss event frequency, which is reducing the likelihood. And the right side is loss magnitude, that no matter what you do, you'll never be at 0% likelihood.
Right.
There's always a chance. And when that happens, what do you do to go ahead and minimize the impact and the damage which is possible?
Yeah.
Erik, this has been such a pleasure and an honor to be speaking with you. And this has been one of the most, I would say, insightful conversations I've had on this show. So thank you so much for taking out the time. And it's wonderful to be here.